Right, well, I guess it's been long enough, so yeah, let's do this. Hello, and welcome back to another rather illustrious Trace Velo production. My name, as always, is Luke. So today, ladies and gentlemen, I am quite excited. My bike, as it stands here before you, is akin to the ship of Theseus, albeit the cheap Chinese cycle equivalent. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with this particular fable, the ancient Greek philosopher Plutarch supposed that the very ship sailed into a great battle by the Greek hero, founder, and king of Athens, Theseus, was preserved after the battle as a museum piece within a harbour. Now, over the years, the ship, made of wood as it was, began to rot, and as it did so, the rotten planks were replaced with fresh, strong timber. Now, the question posed by Plutarch, once all of the planks have been replaced, can this very ship still be considered the ship of Theseus? Now, so too with my bicycle here. Soon, all of the original parts will have been replaced. So can this bicycle still be considered the same bicycle I started with? I present to you the Cinarello of Theseus. My name is Luke, and thank you for attending my TED Talk. Okay, so over the years, I have replaced or upgraded virtually every single component on my bike here. One of the constants, however, has been my Tiagra Groupset, which I actually migrated over from an old bike of mine when I bought this frame back in 2016. But this changes today. The long anticipated and highly requested Sensah Empire upgrade is here. Or is it going to be a downgrade? I guess we'll find out. I've got here the 11-speed Groupset. I didn't go for the Sensah Empire Pro, the 12-speed Groupset, mainly because parts like chains and cassettes are much cheaper for 11-speed Groupsets because they're much more ubiquitous than their 12-speed brethren. Plus, this Groupset here cost me 80 quid, so like nothing really. Whereas the Sensah Empire Pro was like double, if not more than that. And here on Trace Velo, we are all about biggest bang for your buck, bargain bucket bike parts. Plus, yeah, I'm a massive fucking cheapskate, so there's that as well. Anyway, I'm going to give you a little rundown of the Groupset today and get it installed on my bike here. Now, this isn't necessarily a detailed review because I'm going to need to put some miles on the Sensah Groupset before I can kind of give you my thoughts. But I reckon this is going to be pretty interesting for those of you considering buying this Groupset for yourself. So with that in mind, let's get cracking. Also, this is quite a long video, so if you want to jump around the topics, as always, you can check for timestamps in the video description. Right, first off, a quick rundown of what you get for your 80 quid or about 100 bucks. So you get both shifters here, 11 speed, as I mentioned, feel pretty decent quality out of the box and come in at 468 grams. Short cage rear derailleur feels pretty nice and robust, 197 grams on the scales for this. And a braze-on front derailleur, pretty simple construction, nothing too fancy here, at 96 grams. So for all these parts, that's a total of 761 grams. So just for your info, the equivalent Tiagra setup this is replacing weighs in at 863 grams. So that's just over 100 grams saving. Now, this Sensah Empire is the 2019/2020 revision. You might have seen a few videos or ads where the colour scheme is a metallic grey, and in this case the parts are all black. So other than these cosmetic changes, they seem to have changed a few features of the design too. For example, this B-screw adjustment plate here was allegedly plastic and now it's metal, and the front mech shifter had 2 trimming positions, I believe, whereas these seem to have 3. Anyway, enough chit-chat and let's get this thing installed. Okay, so I'm going to dive right in and start ripping the Tiagra parts off my bike. First thing I did here was to undo a few bolts and whip out the existing cables to get the bike ready to be recabled, basically. Okay, so I've got all the cables that I've removed from the bike on the floor there, and what I've done is I've replaced them with cable guide tubes that feed through the frame so I can easily reroute the cables. I have a whole video dedicated to that topic if you want to know sort of how to do that. Anyway, next up, what I've got here is this is an internally routed carbon handlebar. You can see that the cables, I'm not sure if you can see, but the cables pop out the bottom here. So these cable outers that feed through the bar already, I'm going to try and reuse them and try and get away without recabling this entire bar, because these cable outers are not particularly old actually, and they'll be fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip off the grip tape and try and reuse it if I can. And then I'm going to just try and replace this Tiagra shifter with the Sensah shifter. This is dependent on whether the kind of areas that the cable outers feed into the back of the Tiagra shifter here, whether they're the same on the Sensah shifter. I'm sure they'll be a little bit different, but I'm basically going to try and get away without having to redo all of this cabling, because that'll just be a bit of a pain. So yeah, wish me luck and let's crack on. Okay, so normally I would not bother reusing grip tape or the cable outers. I would just replace everything. But in this case, it was all in pretty good nick and it had been on the bike less than 6 months. So yeah, didn't really need replacing. So to save a bit of time and some cabbage, that's yeah, that's money. Let's reuse it. Success. Oh, that's quite easy. Right, okay, so this is the Tiagra shifter here, and if I peel back the rubber, the gear cable outer comes in the bottom here, and the brake cable outer comes in the top there, so they kind of come in parallel on the shifter. If you check this photo, this is exactly how they come out of the bar as I've got it set up. Now the Sensah set differs slightly, so let me grab that and I'll show you. So this is the Sensah shifter, the equivalent one, and I'll peel back the rubber again, and you will see that it differs. So the gear cable outer comes in the top here, but the brake cable outer comes in the other side. So rather than being parallel, they kind of one either side of the shifter. So it's different to how Shimano sets their shifters up. And I'm going to see if I can make the existing cable outers work, but yeah, we'll see.
5 minutes later.
Okay, cool, so I got the shifter installed. Not the simplest installation in the world, but I got there in the end. And I was able to reuse the existing cable outers that ran through the bar, which is quite useful. This is the shifter for the rear cassette. And the first thing you'll probably see is that I've taken the rubber grips off of the shifter here. And here's what they look like. So they look pretty durable actually, and pretty good and comfortable. So the quality of these looks nice, which is pretty cool. Anyway, the way it mounts onto the bar, the clamp is basically identical to the Tiagra setup. So you've got the clamp there, and you've got a bolt which you do up, and it clamps it onto the bar. Super simple. Anyway, I assumed that this here was going to be the gear cable, and this was going to be the brake cable out of this shifter. Wrong, it's the other way around. So this is the gear cable across the top, and this is the brake cable. Now for the Shimano setup, I had these cables coming out in the opposite orientation, so I had to kind of flip them around, which was a bit of a pain, and it took a while to finagle them in the bar. But it's done now, and yeah, it works really well. So this is the gear cable, and you can see that I can choose to either route it down the side of the shifter here, or along the top. So I'll be routing it along the top like so, and I'll tape it down like that. The angles look quite sharp, but I've already tested it, and I've got the gear cable here. It shifts really, really smoothly. So really happy with that, and that's basically done. So next up, strip off the bar tape off of this bar here, and mount the other shifter for the front derailleur. So yeah, let's get cracking. So you may have seen in that previous clip that I had placed some clear plastic wrap underneath the shifter clamps. This is just to spread the clamping load a little around the carbon bar and prevent the shifters from shifting, I suppose, when I'm giving it welly on the bike. Bada bing! Got him! Cha-cha-cha-cha-cha! Okay, cool, so you can see the cable outers have been swapped over, so we've got the brake cable on the bottom and the gear cable outer on the top. And you can see here, this is the clamp for the shifter. Now what I would normally do is I would get the shifter and the clamp as a one-piece unit and kind of slide it up the bar. But in this instance, I found it easier to actually remove the bolt, which would sit in there entirely, and just put the clamp to where I need it, get the cable outers to kind of where I want them, and then clamp this on later. Just makes my life a little bit easier with these particular shifters, so you might find that useful. Anyway, I'm gonna get this fitted up now, get the cable outers routed, and yeah, that'll basically be the front end done. So yeah, pretty cool. Okay, so this is a clip of me mounting the shifter, but just as an FYI, when pulling the rubber hoods back over the shifters, once everything is in place, to help them slip over, you can use a bit of alcohol gel. I know it's kind of a premium commodity at the moment, but you only need a tiny squirt, and once they're on, if you find they're a little stretched and loose, rubber actually shrinks
underheating. So I used a hairdryer for a minute or two, and once they cool, the hoods should shrink back to their original shape.
Okay, cool. So this has nothing to do with the installation, but a commenter by the name of Big Boots always mentions this on virtually every video. So I thought I'd have a look today and see if he knows what I'm talking about. So basically there's a gap here between the fork and the frame, and in this instance here it's about 1/2 centimetre. Now the issue is that mud and water when you're riding along can get sprayed up into this area and kind of degrade the bearing. So the smaller this gap is, the better really. So I have the bearing here sitting on top of this bearing race, this metal clip, this thing here. So what I can apparently do is take this out of the setup, let the bearing sit on top of this fork, and that will minimize this gap. I'm not sure if it's really gonna work, but I'm gonna have a look anyway as I'm ripping this apart. So yeah, let's crack on.
A few moments later.
Right, Big Boots. I didn't think this would make any difference, but it's only gone and flipping worked. Yeah, so the bearing sits on top of the fork here, sits there perfectly, fits in, no rubbing. Amazing fit there. And here's the bearing race. It had that split in it there from the factory, just FYI, but managed to take that out of the setup here. That's weight savings off the bike, just like that. And the gap is gone. So Big Boots, thank you for the suggestion. Really, really cracking. And yeah, you guys in the comments, you know your stuff, I'll give you that.
Now, back to our program.
Right, okay, cool. So made some great progress so far. So I've basically fitted the left and right shifters now, so I'll bring you in. So you can see I've taped them up to anchor them in place, to anchor the cable outer. So we've got the gear cable outer running over the top here and the brake cable outer running there underneath. Same for this side. So gear cable outer, brake cable outer, and I've, yeah, fed them all through and actually fed the cables through too. So we've got both cables coming out there and both cables coming out this side too. Initially, the shifting feels quite nice. I've kind of had a little play around with it, and yeah, I've got high hopes for it actually. So really excited to get this out on the road. Anyway, next up, I'm going to replace the front derailleur and the rear derailleur with the new Sensah ones. Got to get rid of this obsolete 10-speed stuff, 10-speed gubbin. So going to get rid of the chain, replace it with this pretty tasty looking 11-speed SRAM chain here. So yeah, replace that, and also replace this 10-speed cassette with the 11-speed equivalent. Anyway, yeah, really excited, so let's get cracking.
Speed is of the essence.
Okay, cool, so I've added the front and rear derailleur on and the cassette too. So these, the front and rear derailleur just bolted straight in. It was a straight swap, no complications at all. And obviously the cassette went on super easily. So yeah, really great, that's all done. And we're very nearly there really. So all I've got left to do is rerun the cables through the bike, add on the bar tape, add the chain on, and yeah, we're good to go. So I'm gonna get that done now, and I will see you when it's finished.
So the recabling wasn't particularly difficult, it all went pretty smoothly. It's funny though, when you start tearing down your bike like this, you inevitably find something you weren't expecting. For example, after I shot this, I thought I had it all squared away, but the rear brake started sticking. So basically, spent the following hour or two troubleshooting that and ended up completely pulling the rear brake caliper apart to service it. I got it sorted, but yeah, with jobs like this on a well-used bike like mine, take the time you think it will take and double it basically.
Right, so, ladies and gentlemen, here it is in all its 11-speed glory. No more plebeian 10-speed for Tracefer though. Yeah, anyway, I actually really love the way this group set looks. I wasn't crazy keen on the old grey metallic Sensah Empire group set, but this in all black, I just think, yeah, I think it looks the business. But overall, installation was pretty straightforward. A few little complications, but yeah, that's mainly my fault because I stubbornly insisted on reusing the existing cable outers that ran through the bar. If I'd have done a fresh install, it would have been no more complicated than any Shimano setup I've ever done. But I actually really like the fact that on the Sensah shifter, you can choose to route the gear cable outer on either side of the shifter body. I just think that gives you a few more options with regards to cable routing compared to a Shimano shifter. But needless to say, if on your bike you currently run Shimano, you should have no problem switching over to this Sensah setup. But a question that I personally had was how the hell
do these shifters function? And how do they compare to a Shimano setup? Right, so I'm comparing my Tiagra shifting to the Sensah setup, but it's pretty indicative of how all the recent Shimano group sets kind of function, be that Claris, Sora, Tiagra 105, Ultegra, or yeah, even Dura Ace. Okay, this is the shifter for the rear cassette, and you go down the range, so make it harder to pedal by using this inner lever here, and you go down the range one at a time. So I've just dropped 3 gears there, and I can go back up the range, so make it easier to pedal by using the brake lever one at a time, or if I dump the gears out and I need to get back up the range quickly, a big swing gives me a maximum of 2 jumps on the cassette. Okay, so on the same Sensah shifter here, there are no separate up or down shift levers. You've just got the one lever here, and you move down the range at the back one at a time by clicking in the lever slightly. So I've just dropped 2 at the back there, and I can move up the range one at a time by giving it a little swing further in, and you'll hear 2 clicks, but that's 1 upshift. So that is 1 upshift there, and if I dump out some gears, and say I want to move up the range a bit quicker, if I do a full swing, I can move up the range at the back a maximum of 2 gears, but you'll hear 3 clicks, so listen to this. So 3 clicks there, but that's an upshift of 2. Okay, this is the shifter for the front derailleur, and there are 3 trim positions available with Tiagra. So I can drop it down 2 trim positions in one go using this lever. 1, 2. I'm now in the small chainring, but I have a 3rd trim position available, so I can bring the derailleur arm in slightly more, like so, and now I can swing the derailleur arm back up into the big chainring through all 3 trim positions in one go. 1, 2, 3, and I'm now in the big chainring again. Okay, so on this Sensah shifter here, there are 3 trim positions available for the front derailleur. I'm in the large chainring now, and I can drop 1 trim position at a time using this lever, so I'll just drop all 3 now. 1, 2, 3, and now I'm in the small chainring. And if I want to move back up into the large chainring, I can do a big swing of the lever and move 3 trim positions in one go. So there we go, now I'm back into the big chainring. But there's one slightly annoying thing about this setup.
Okay, I've got my bike in the bike stand here to demonstrate. Now on Tiagra, I can easily drop from the large into the small chainring. So that's dropping 2 trim positions in one sweep of the inner lever. Now that feature of Tiagra is super useful in traffic because if I hit the brakes, I can easily drop into the smaller chainring in one swift movement. So I'm ready in a lower gear to kind of quickly pull away. But you can't do that quite as easily on the Sensah setup. So let me demonstrate. So I'm pedaling along and I need to change into the smaller chainring. I give it 1 click of the shifter to drop 1 trim position, but it's not enough. I need to click it again. So to drop from the large to the small chainring, I have to click the shifter twice. I can easily move into the large chainring in one movement, like so. But yeah, to drop into the smaller ring, I need to use 2 clicks. I mean, not the biggest deal in the world, but it does take a little bit of getting used to.
Okay, so very quickly, some of you might be wondering why you need so many trim positions on the front anyway, and it's basically to allow cross-chaining. So in this example, I'm in the big ring at the front, and I'm in the lowest gear at the back there. Now, you're not supposed to do this because basically what happens is the chain, if I try and show you, the chain is not straight. It's a kind of an angle, and that basically means the chain hits the back of the derailleur arm here and makes a horrible grinding noise. But if I click down a trim position, pop, that's basically moved the derailleur arm in slightly, so this chain no longer intersects the back of the derailleur arm and it stops that grinding noise. Now, trim positions on front derailleurs, this is a feature I have never really used in my life, and cross-chaining is a bad habit in my opinion anyway. I mean, in this example, if you're at the lowest gear on the back, chances are you should probably be in the small chainring anyway. But that's just me. I'm sure some people will be happy to have that feature. But yeah, anyway, let's move on. Okay, so I've had this Sensah setup on my bike now for like 2 days, and I've done about 50 to 60 miles, some of that on the rollers as well. So yeah, what's the verdict? Well, first thing to mention is, yeah, 50, 60 miles is basically nothing in terms of being able to test the kind of durability or the longevity of this group set. So I can't talk to that side of things. Although, that being said, I've got quite high hopes actually. I think this should be quite a long-lasting group set. But anyway, all that aside, what are my first impressions? Well, once the whole group set was on the bike, the initial indexing of the gears at the back was pretty finicky actually, and seemed to be a bit less forgiving than some of the Shimano setups I've worked on in the past. For example, I've never had a rear derailleur that's been so affected by the position of the B limit screw before, so you kind of had to play around with that before it would shift kind of reliably. But once you get it all dialed in, the shifting is pretty flipping good. Now the front derailleur here shifts fine up and down, apart from the double click shifting, which I mentioned earlier. Once you get used to that, it works perfectly really. So I've got no issues with the front derailleur. Works fine, all good. On the back, downshifts are super crisp. Each click from the shifter at the front is super satisfying, and it's always followed by a quick positive shift down the range at the back. Upshifts on the rear cassette, they're not as satisfying, and at least initially I did miss the kind of ease of a Shimano upshift. I'm sure it will get better with a bit of muscle memory, but at least when you start out, it's quite easy to kind of miss shift. So yeah, watch this clip and I will explain what I'm talking about.
Okay, cool. So I've got the bike on the rollers here to give you some idea of what this setup is going to be like to use on the road. Now, downshifting is really nice. Boom, that's one. Boom, that's two. Really happy with the downshifts. On the upshifts, that's one, that's two. Seems to be all right. And now if I want to upshift two in a go, so I'll drop down. If I give the lever a big swing, I can move up two in the range. One, two, good to go, right? So, this sometimes, it doesn't work all the time on an upshift. So let me try and catch it out and I'll explain. So the difference in lever swing between one upshift and two is not massive. So at least initially I would go for sort of one upshift, but catch the second. And because I wasn't super deliberate with my movements of the lever, it would kind of not index properly at the rear, and the rear derailleur would kind of sit between two gears and make a horrible noise. Okay, I'll try and go for an upshift here and try and get it caught between two gears so you can see what I'm talking about. So that's two, but it's not indexed properly. So because I wasn't super deliberate with the lever movement, I can hear that it's kind of stuck and not indexed properly, which is not fantastic. So conversely, if I drop down and give it a proper swing, there, it shifts fine. So when you're shifting on this, to shift between one and two, upshifts, you need to be really deliberate with how you go about it. Okay, but after a sort of hour or two of riding, I definitely got the hang of it, and shifting now is much more predictable. But yeah, at least when you start out, the shifting on these is not quite as foolproof as it is on the Shimano sort of upshifts.
So yeah, build quality is pretty decent. The install was pretty straightforward, all things considered. The hoods here, these are actually quite comfortable out on the road. And the shifting performance, I know I kind of downplayed it, but once you get your head around it and sort of get used to where to position the levers, shifting is actually pretty reliable too. Oh, and yeah, managed to shave off another 200 grams. 200. Shave off another 200 grams from my bike here by switching over to this Groupset. So yeah, winner, chicken dinner.
Just FYI, this 200 grams comes from the 102 grams mentioned at the beginning, a much lighter cassette and chain, and a reduction in the length of cable outers used. Plus, I'm sure the removal of the bearing race didn't hurt either.
So yeah, winner, chicken dinner. But yeah, I mean, the biggest takeaway for me is for £80. Colour me pretty freaking impressed with this Groupset. Now, I have only done a couple of miles on this Groupset so far, but I will definitely be keeping it on my bike from here on out, basically. So the hands of time will tell if it holds up. So yeah, anyway, that is all that we've got time for in this episode of Trace Fellow. So yeah, subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this little video that I put together. And if you've got any questions or any comments about this Sensah Empire Groupset or about Groupsets in general, then throw them down in the comments below and I'll try my best to get back to as many of you as I can. Anyway, yeah, that's it. So I'll see you guys next time. crazy. Finish each other. Sandwiches. That's what I was gonna say. Just again, a mental synchronization can have but one explanation. We're just meant to be. Say goodbye to the pain of the past. Nothing like we've ever known before. Love is an open